You send him 41,000 emails, 350 voice messages, 744 tweets, 48 Facebook messages, and 106 letters.
Critical condition continues. I'm going to make this video for February the 2nd. I'm going to add all these clips together for the last few days around February the 2nd, because it's the day, it's now 2 years to the day exactly since Sheepcote Lane made the decision to incriminate this complaint and say it's false or improper, or brand it and incriminate it as false or improper. Basically writing off the complaint as me telling lies, basically. And that's pretty much set the tone, or set the record for the last 2 years in a critical condition, getting gradually and progressively worse. Since Sheepcote Lane 2 years ago, I'm still in the exact same place, to where my tent was at the time. It's not moved. I'm still almost 2 years later in the exact same location, obviously in a different tent, but in the same location 2 years later. And it's going to go on to 3 years later because the problem's getting progressively worse. So since Sheepcote Lane 2 years ago, it's got significant. The complaint I made is for misuse of the institutional self and the fact it's costing me my life. And since making that complaint and those officers branding the complaint as a lie or false or improper, they've gone on and continued doing what they did before, completely ignored the complaint, or apparently incriminated it and carried on doing what they were, catastrophically. So I've made a full strenuous complaint to South Yorkshire Police about being institutionalised, told them this in an interview when they've arrested me for complaining about their crimes. So I've complained about their crimes to them. They've arrested me for it, saying it's illegal to complain about their crimes, and they've not addressed on it, and it's just got significantly or progressively worse. So since then, I'll tell you why it's progressively got worse, or I'll make it clear like I've on every other videos. A short time after that, after being arrested, or seemingly overnight, what felt like very short time after, they snagged my ability to breathe for myself. So I was struggling to breathe. All of a sudden my jaw, I was struggling to breathe. They were restricting my breathing. My jaw's shut. My jaw's now been completely, my jaw internally is encapsulated shut now for over a year. But it got gradually worse at the time, after Sheepcote Lane, where they were snagging my power, and what I described as stopping me getting power in society. So I've described it as they've locked my jaw completely shut internally, where it's shut, it's wired shut. It's an encapsulation dome-like process on the institutional self, where it's completely locked shut or encapsulated shut with all my control over my own life out. So I'm basically in a controlled state, but my jaw is completely locked shut 24 hours a day. And for a year now, it's been locked shut 24 hours a day now for a full year. So for a full year, my jaw has been locked shut, and it happened immediately or in a short time after being arrested by Sheepcote Lane for complaining about these exact things. So that's another thing, where my jaw's locked shut and it's getting tighter and tighter shut on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And also, one of the biggest ones, they've obviously deemed me unfit to have children, because in a short time after that, or a short, and not much longer, or not a short period of time after those incidents, or after that time, they went straight into the institutional self after the arrest, straight into the institutional self, and started committing crime against my sex power and stripping it out, or using mortification of self, which is exactly what I told them to stop doing because it's criminal. Committing crime against my power, sex power internally, and stripping it out. So I'm left here now in a position 2 years later, and I can guarantee now, I can't think, that's probably been over a year as well. My penis shrunk, or my penis erection size shrunk by 2/3 in a short space of time, in potentially 8 months, when erect, which has never happened before ever. I can't think of a time where it's happened and all my arousal or sexual excitement just got stripped out and internalised. And I didn't care less about the system fucking years ago when they were committing crime against me whatsoever. For this, to make the complaint that's got multiple officers in jail, and then they put one of their colleagues on the case to arrest me for the complaint, and then the problem still continues catastrophically. That's serious catastrophic failings. It's like I said, it's probably some of the worst criminality I've ever seen. In fact, it is the worst criminality I've ever seen. Because the fact is, they're supposed to have addressed that, or realistically needed to address that 10 times over in the last 20 years. And I've just been in an interview with them, made it clear to them what the issue is, or clear enough, and they've completely ignored it and carried on. So it means that they're just doing what they want. And if there would ever be any doubt about whether they've committed crime or not, the fact is, it's why my jaw shut. It's costing me every day of my life. I told them this. So, for me, now, sat here 2 years later, still in a significantly more controlled state than what I was before, when that's the complaint. So I complained to him about being in a controlled state. He arrested me, saying it's illegal to complain about him. And then the process or the problem got significantly worse. And now it's 2 years later, and I'm in a significantly more controlled state now. So they completely ignored my entitlement to justice, or entitlement to get officers in jail, or the outright blatant immediate arrest that needed to be made at the time, and carried on doing what they're doing anyway and committing crime against me. So there was blatant arrest that needed making 5-10 years ago. I've gone into a police station way overdue, 10 years overdue for arrest, and they still carried on ignoring me, even though I've been on interview for the complaint, voicing or making it very clear, or clear enough what the issue is, that I'm institutionalised, ignored my power or entitlement to put me in jail, and carried on doing it. I'm now in a significantly more controlled state now. So, for me, there's nothing I can do to do. They're doing what they want. They do what they want. They think they're entitled to do what they want. They don't. There's no regulation to what they're doing. They're not being arrested for what they're doing. They're not accounting for anything, any crimes being committed in that institutional self or a controlled state. That's the issue that you've got. They're committing. That's the reason it's become a crime against humanity, because the system is not accounting or taking responsibility or giving justice or doing justice for individuals that have had crimes committed against them in a controlled state like me, and that's the fact. The justice system does not want to do justice for controlled states having crime committed against them, and that's the problem. Like me, I've been controlled into sadistic sex crime, high-risk sexual degrading, high-risk sexual humiliation. All of these sexual incidents where they've humiliated my sex power in a controlled state, any single one of them, it'd be worse than all my crimes put together. If you commit those crimes in society, you can get an all-life order. If you can commit those that level of sexual degrading to somebody, or homosexual role plays, or crippling sexual degrading or humiliation, you can get an all-life order, which means you never get out. You can get a life sentence. So why is it these officers are committing those crimes, or the system's committing those crimes against people in a controlled state? They don't want to account for it. It means, like I said on other videos, they're committing hundreds, if not thousands, of crimes in the institutional self. And I've said, just me as an individual, they've probably committed against me just in 1 month, or this year, because it's now February the 2nd, so it's not been long this year. 6 weeks into the year, 2026, they've committed more crime against me than what went through my local courts. And I've just read a document about a judge, about a recent case in my local court, saying it's the worst case of corruption he's ever seen for a prison officer, a mentally ill prison officer sleeping with a prisoner. So what I'm trying to say is this: it's 6 weeks into the year, and already within 6 weeks I can guarantee now for a fact the system has committed more crime against me in the institutional self than what's gone through my local courtroom. And I'm aware that there's some very serious cases gone through the local courtroom. It means they're creating power by committing crime in the institutional self that's never accounted for and they're never taken responsibility for. It means they don't do justice for controlled states having crime committed against them. They say it's mentally ill or relativise you're poorly or blame drug use. So they use people in a controlled state to commit crime against them, humiliating them, degrading them, controlling them into assaults, controlling them into sexual humiliation, sexual degrading, internally misusing the institutionalisation process like they have me, and snagging the sex power, snagging their ability to breathe for themselves, which is in some cases killing people, outright just suffocating people in the institutional self because they've internalised their ability to breathe. So they're physically restraining their ability to breathe and it's suffocating them to death when they're asleep. So they're going to sleep at night and they're not waking up because the breathing's been physically internalised. So it's outright murder at that point because the process itself is having catastrophic effects on people. But that's the issue. So problem still continues. My jaw's getting tighter and tighter shut. My teeth now are starting to become loose and damaged because frequently throughout the day my jaw's wide shut. The problem progresses, you know what I mean? They've obviously deemed me unfit to have children at that time, at 32, 31 even. And well, if they haven't, that's the effect that whatever information they put in the systems had, because they went straight into my sex power, started bombarding my power with transgressions, as I've got footage of while I'm in the gym. They stripped every single bit of my drive to go to the gym out, and not every single bit of my sex power out. I've now got very limited or diminished sexual arousal, sexual tension with women. And my penis erections have shrunk 2/3, which means they're 33% the size of what they was, or what they were, before Sheepcote Lane. So why should I, as a member of the public or ex-criminal, have a 33% erection size just because of some information that a police officer submitted in the system? I shouldn't. Why should I do that? That is worse than any crime I've committed myself anyway. It's worse than millionaires pay millions to get penis size corrected. Millionaires on the beauty industry or pharmaceutical industry is worth billions because of people wanting higher testosterone or higher hormonal instincts or whatever else. So they're paying absolute fortunes and making a full market out of it that's global, a global market worth billions, to address an issue that these bog standard entry-level officers from bottom of town just freely go into somebody's institutional self and pull out anyway on their own. So they feel as though they're entitled to potentially global power at that point. They just feel as though they can go into somebody's institutional self, strip out all the sex drives on their own based off some information they've made up between themselves. So they're essentially creating power between themselves. But as I've just said, that effect it's having on that individual is worth more than their jobs 100 times over. The reality of it and the actual effect it has on the human being or individual isn't correctly documented, and the effects and consequences of what these individual officers are actually doing by submitting this information they never get scrutinised, they never get asked or questioned. Because they don't believe it has any involvement or physical implications anyway. So the information they've put through the system regards to the institutional self, they don't believe has any implications to anybody anyway. They're saying that it has no problems or consequences for the individual, but that's not what's happening here in reality, here today. So what ends up happening is they just got free will to submit information and commit crime against people believing they've done nothing wrong. But in society, you know they've done something wrong because you're sat here like what I am now. We're 33% erection because of some information that entry-level officers could potentially have submitted with regards to the institutional self. And as I've just said, that plays a significant role in social life in society. It's worth a fortune. So if you were to put a price on your sex drives right now at a young age, what would you put it? Some millionaires have put millions on it. Me personally, at a young age, like what they've done to me, where they started internalising it at 13-year-old, I'd say it could be worth 250k plus. So to lose something, so they've gone into my life as a child and cost me my sex drives that I've put a price on easily at 250 grand without a conviction as a child or a minor. So for me, even if you're a sexual predator that's been convicted of serious serial sex crime and you're in prison and it's been proven, even then, to what extent would you really have the right to start costing people stuff worth 250 grand? You've got to, obviously, the law itself says it's got to be in proportion to whatever crime's been committed. So, for example, the law itself says it's got to be in proportion to actually the damage that it's caused and the laws that's been broken. So these individuals can't just, for example, like what's happened with me, for a minor criminal damage, or for this case, let's just say, for a minor infringement of the law. I got convicted 2 years ago of improper use of communications because South Yorkshire Police said this complaint that I'm making now wasn't correct. It was basically a lie because it was false or improper. So I'm basically improperly using the complaints procedure because the information I've submitted does not amount to an investigation. So this information, including this video that I've submitted to South Yorkshire Police, doesn't amount to a criminal investigation. So they're saying the information's false or improper and I'm improperly using a communications device. So that's the crime they've said that it is. It's not actually a major crime, it's actually a minor crime. As far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't have even faced jail for this. I got a £300 fine, which is very hefty. So I got a very hefty fine, a £300 fine, for making this complaint to the police, right? So at what point then, taking that into consideration, I've committed a minor infringement of the law, gone to court for improper use of a communications device that had nothing to do with sex, nothing to do with my future or my children. I just got a £300 fine for it. It had nothing to do, there wasn't anything in relation to women, there wasn't any women involved from my perspective. It was just me making a complaint. So at what point then, within that crime, would they see it fit, or would they be able to exploit that situation to pull out somebody's sex power or pull out their ability to breathe? So they've pulled out my ability to breathe. Why had my jaw completely shut by leaving me in a controlled state? They've snagged all my ability to get power in society, which means I'm spending most days in the tent incapable of getting up, and also snagged all my ability to get erections or sexually aroused. So my penis erection's 33% of the size it was before. So why then, that being said, in proportion to the crime committed, would somebody in normal thinking mind, and this is the issue that I've got, for the crime I've apparently committed, which is improper use of communications, so I've committed the crime of improper use of communications, got a £300 fine for this minor infringement of the law. So at what point then within that crime would anybody in rational mind believe that in proportion to that crime that they can go into your life and strip out your sex power? So you've got a 33% erection and deeming you, from my opinion, deeming somebody incapable of physically having sex again at 32 or 31-year-old. Like what point within that minor infringement would they be able to make such catastrophic changes to somebody's life, or absolute horrific long-term decisions about somebody's life for a £300 fine minor infringement for a minor communications crime, where I've been submitting a picture of me to South Yorkshire Police saying I'm not a council tramp. I've been basically submitting pictures to South Yorkshire Police and me saying I'm not a council tramp, so that they pull this institutional self out that's costing me every day of my life. They've ignored me, randomly arrested me, turned up in the morning and arrested me for it, and claimed it's improper use and wrote the complaint off as a lie. Wrote the complaint off as false or improper, calling me a liar. I'm now sat here 2 years later. That's how much of a liar I am. I'm sat here 2 years later with a 33% erection and my jaw's been locked shut for a full year. That's how much of a liar I am. So I've made a complaint about all this institutional self and control. They've convicted me of a crime, saying I'm full of shit, claiming I'm a liar and I've made it all up. And I sat here 2 years later in a critical condition with my jaw wired shut for a full year, costing me every hour or every minute or every day. And also I've deemed myself fully incapable of physically having sex because they snagged my erections and arousal. So there's a very, very limited, if minute possibility of me engaging in sexual relations. So they basically stopped me having children. So at what point then, or at what stage, does that work in proportion? 3 knobheads have turned up at the homeless hostel, arrested me, saying that it was for improper use of communications. At what point, or in proportion to that crime, for complaining about this, to where they've incriminated this complaint, at what point within that would they have the right to stop somebody having children? It means they do what they want, they rationalise whatever they want, or justify whatever behaviour they want, however they want. They've justified stopping me having children for an improper use of communication. That had nothing to do, it were a £300 fine, it had nothing to do with children. It had nothing to do with me having kids or my long-term future. This is the issue that I've got. They rationalise or justify the behaviour however they want because they're not regulated. And they'll say, well, you need a solicitor. But the fact is, it might be right for minor controversies and minor issues. But when they're committing Irish crime and they're doing what they want, costing people their lives, it's not necessarily a controversy. It's not really like a debate or a minor trivial issue that could be settled. It's not a civil dispute at that point. They're just outright committing catastrophic and horrific crime against people and writing people's power off for the long-term future and rationalising it with stuff like improper use of communications. So they've not really ever got the right. They've not got the power to commit the actions that they're committing. They're using an improper use of communications to write somebody's ability to get an erection off and stopping them and deeming them physically incapable of having sex ever again at 31. And if that's not what they've done, or they don't believe they've done that in the system, that's the effect it's had in society, because I've deemed myself incapable of ever having physical sexual intercourse again because they snagged my sexual arousal, snagged my sex power. So whatever information they put in Sheepcote Lane has deemed me unfit to have children. Fact, there's a very limited, minute possibility you can do it because I can't get erections. It's 33% of the size. I can't even penetrate a woman because they snagged my sex power and my penis has shrunk 66%. So they're saying I'm a liar. Which bit of that would make me a liar? Which bit of that then makes me a liar and that I'm making it up when I'm having serious catastrophic effects or physical implications for the rubbish them 3 knobheads have put in the system? So problem still continues, and this has happened either way. It doesn't matter what them 3 knobheads have done or not. The problem is they do what they want, whether they've arrested you or not. They could have done that. They could have had all those physical effects on my life without even arresting me, and that's the problem. So realistically, they didn't even need to make that arrest. They could have just done that on their own like they do usually. They just make a story to put in the system to justify doing what they're doing. Basically to cover their own backs, essentially. Basically making a story in the system to justify or rationalise their actions in the system. But to be honest, it's that unregulated, they don't even need to do that. They did not even have to arrest me to make those decisions about my life and internalise my sex drive. They could have just done that when I was sat in my own house. Like they have many a times where they pulled my ignorance out, or they pulled my ability to sleep out when I've got nothing to do with police at all. I'm just sat in my own home. Or as a minor, where I'm under the age of 16, with no criminal convictions, they went straight into the control of my own life and internalised it without a conviction under the age of 16, so I'm not even an adult. That's because they don't need to rationalise and justify it. That's how unregulated it is, because they just do what they want. Or when there's members of the public, they've not even got criminal convictions. There's members of the public, they've got no criminal convictions, nothing to do with crime whatsoever. They're going straight into their life with that institutional self on, internalising the ability to breathe, and miraculously they're turning up dead within a short space of time, whether it be 1 month or 10 years. And the reason that it's happened is because they've been suffocated to death and it's going down as natural causes. So it's basically, like I said, it's just murder at that point. They're using the institutional self to commit crime against people, whether it be the smallest crime or the most mass crime, where terrorist criminals, for example, this is an example, where terrorist criminals in a controlled state are stabbing people at random or blowing stuff up, which is multiple homicides or deaths, because they're in a controlled state and the system's been relativized in pure shit, pure rubbish, into that institutional self for that long, and they're blaming mental illness or drug use and calling them criminals, when in a matter of fact they've caused it themselves whilst they're in a controlled state. Fucking joke. So, problem getting worse and worse basically. This is daily basis getting worse and worse. Crippling transgressions, round the clock, all day every day. Sleeping pattern completely destroyed. Crippling transgressions, crippling and catastrophic, degrading all day. My entire life snagged into a detective saying sorry all day every day while committing crime against me and humiliating my power. All day, round the clock, detective, the system replicating a detective saying sorry to me and apologising into my power. All day, every day. So, that being said, all day, crippling, degrading, into every time my family's died, every time I've been assaulted, he's killed my power and he gets away with what he wants and he says sorry for it whilst humiliating, degrading me. So he kills my power, costing me potentially £1 million plus in every day of my life, which he could never put a price on, and humiliates my power by saying sorry to me. Internally, they've not addressed it in society, they've not paid me out £1 million, they've not arrested 10 officers, they don't do nothing whatsoever, inflicting crippling, belittling and humiliation, where he's entitled to kill your power and says sorry for it internally while belittling and degrading your power. It's got multiple officers in jail and cost me, what I've said, 60 to 80% of my life. So I've lost 60 to 80% of my life for a detective to humiliate my power and say sorry while committing crime against me. So he's picked up their regional officers' prowess by committing crime against somebody to say sorry to him, because they've told him he can do what he wants, or told them they're entitled to go into people's lives to commit crime against them. So they've been allowed as officers to go into people's lives and commit crime against them with that institutional self on. They're committing crime against the power in the institutional self, blaming mental illness and drug use, and the crimes that they're racking up, or the crimes that they're committing, as I've just said, are usually about thousands of times worse than what goes through the courtroom. Hundreds, and in some cases thousands times than what goes through the courtroom. So the problem that I've got at this point now is I've now been waiting for this forced suicide for 10 years, and the only time that they could have really addressed that, where the perfect time where they've addressed that, is in Sheepcote Lane, where they arrested me for the complaint. The only action that they could have taken there, before I even start thinking about justice, before I even start talking about justice or what crimes have been committed, they had no other option but to pull the institutional self off. The institutional self partners locking my jaw shut and snagged all my sex power and my drives. And it can basically pull the control state off. So as soon as I went into Sheepcote Lane, they needed to strip every single bit of that control state out, which apparently they never do, so they should never do it. They should never do it in the first place. If they can't pull that out, and they'll say, solicitor, the fact is, if it's costing you your life, you can go to jail, and that's my point. I told them this at the time. Me as an individual, I do not go out of my way to get a solicitor, potentially pay money for a solicitor to address issues or fuck-ups or problems that these individuals have caused where they've been messing around in an institutional self. So I've been sat in my home or in my house as a minor in some cases with that institutional self on, snagging parts of my life like my sex power, my ability to think for myself, the controlled state, stripping my ignorance out, my ability to think or sleep. They've gone straight into my power, started stripping it out while I'm sat in my own life. I then am not liable for something that's got nothing to do with me whatsoever. They shouldn't even be in there as far as I'm concerned. They should not be addressing anything in the institutional self anyway. Not only am I not aware of it, I'm saying it's fully illegal to even be in there. So basically, they're committing crime against me in my own house, in the institutional self, without a solicitor, without any criminal convictions, even as a minor, and then telling me, you now need to go out and get a solicitor, making it my problem and liability to pay for a solicitor to address their issues that they've caused over multiple years, committing crime against me that I could never get justice for in a million years. 10 officers could go to jail for what they've done, and it still probably wouldn't get me justice for it. So, problem continues. So this video is going to be for the 2nd of February. I'm going to create this video. I'm going to add all the clips together from recent days and put them all together. So potentially it looks like 3 hours long. Just me speaking, where I've been making videos. It's now 2 years later. It's 2nd of February this video, 2026. And that means it's 2 years to the day since Sheepcote Lane arrested me for these complaints and branded them and criminalised them as false or improper, saying that the information's false. Basically, I'm talking rubbish, like I'm just lying. And ever since then, the whole point of the complaint to South Yorkshire Police was for illegal use of institutionalisation, where they've been controlling me into crime, they've been controlling me into getting assaulted, they've snagged my sex drives, I've never been in a sexual relationship, every single woman I've ever met has slept with somebody else. Basically, the complaint was they had me in a controlled state for the majority of my life and they were committing crime against my power from the system. What I mean by that is they were stopping me getting an education, they stopped me getting employed, they snagged my entire life and my jaw shut in a controlled state, and they used me as a punch bag, or apparently gone into my power to create a job whereby they're entitled to my life to commit crime against my power. So what they do is, as I've explained, they were just using me in a controlled state to do what they want, controlling me into getting assaulted by the colleagues' cases to humiliate my power. Basically creating power for the self, or creating prowess for the self by using somebody in a controlled state to humiliate and degrade. That's it, that's the basics of it. Using a human being, a member of the public, in a controlled state to humiliate the power and put that power in the system. So they were forcing me into sexual degrading, sexual humiliation, assaults, humiliation and degrading, integrating deviant nicknames, basically committing crime against me from the system. Using institutional control and the jurisdiction as officers, blaming crime and mental illness when I'm sat in my own house to create a life for somebody. Basically creating a life for somebody in a controlled state, and the life that they created had nothing to do with my life. And I've said that 60 to 80% of my life has got nothing to do with my life, and I've lost 60 to 80% of it. So, fuck off. Today is 2nd of February, and it's 2 years to the day since I was arrested at Sheepcote Lane, and I addressed all these issues and voiced some of these issues, or made it clear that I was in a severe controlled state, and it's just getting worse. I made this very clear. They completely ignored me, incriminated my power, basically calling me a liar, saying I'm full of rubbish, and put me through court for basically saying I'm telling lies, that I've made it all up in my head apparently. They put me through in court, saying it's false or improper use of communications, incriminated my power, saying they've done nothing wrong, and I've been submitting information that's false or improper, or it's not leading to investigation, so they incriminated me, saying I've broken the law. It's now 2 years later, and I'm still with my jaw. It went from bad to worse, because whatever information they've put in, it's now wired my jaw shut. My jaw internally has been snagged physically shut, or restrained physically shut now for a year. Round the clock, not 1 second is it not being locked shut. So internally they've encapsulated the physical power, it's locked shut. It's getting that serious now. My teeth are starting to become damaged. The nerves in my gums are starting to become damaged because my jaw is completely locked shut in the controlled state. Also, whatever information they put through had significant impact on my life because they snagged or internalised or physically restrained my ability to get sex power. So I've got very limited, or on a daily basis, stripping out my sexual arousal, or basically whatever they put in is preventing me from having children. That's what they must have decided on their own. That's the physical effect it's had, whatever information they put through. And then also what I described as preventing somebody from getting power, which means just in every aspect of your day-to-day life, where it's preventing you from doing anything, just even just basic tasks, basic stuff. Like I said originally last year, when they initially started pulling it out and started snagging what I described as ability to get power, I just wasn't leaving the tent, and it's just got gradually and progressively worse and worse, which has never been a problem before. So it's never been a problem before. They've arrested me for this complaint, started snagging certain aspects of my life, and then all of a sudden I'm having serious physical implications where I haven't got the power to get up and go and get food in society. So I cannot go out and get food. I've not got the physical drive or physical capability to go and get food, clean up. They snagged all my sex power. Like I said, I joined the gym last year, and straight away, in 2024 I joined the gym after coming out of Sheepcote Lane. And all that happened when I went in there, they stripped every single bit of my frustration out, or what I described as frustration, or my power out. And from there, it's just got from bad to worse and progressively worse, where I've been struggling to even just do the basic tasks and the basic chores, because the physical drive or the physical capability, what I described as getting power in society, got physically restrained or snagged. So progressively, as I was going to the gym more and more, they were snagging more and more of my ability to exert power or exert physical exertion. It just got worse and worse to the point of where I'm at now, where my jaw's completely locked shut, my erections are completely diminished in a controlled state. I've got no sexual arousal. They've completely stripped out or banished, literally ripped out every single bit of sexual arousal. My penis erection is now 33% the size it was before I went into Sheepcote Lane, so they've lost 2/3. I've lost 66% of my penis size when erect because Sheepcote Lane has snagged my sexual arousal and internalised it. So it's having significant physical implications on my life just because they're submitting information that I've had nothing. I've not mentioned any of this stuff to them. I haven't said anything to them whatsoever. The complaint is about institutionalisation, exactly that. So my point is this: I complained about the police, they've arrested me. I've made the complaint known to them that it's due to institutionalisation and severe misuse of it. Like serious misuse of control and the institutional self. They've incriminated me and carry on doing it. So they've carried on doing it to a serious, significant worse extent. So they snagged my ability to breathe, my jaw's wide shut. They snagged my sex power so I can't get a penis erection or sexual arousal. Completely abolished any kind of sexual tension with women, any kind of sexual lust, any sexual arousal with women, all my sex power in society so I can't get an erection. And also, like I said, the biggest one is physical exertion of power or physical drive in society where I can't even get up. This, for the last 2 days or 3 days, I've been in physical agony with the pressure, the self-pressing on my internal organs, literally winding me and suffocating me, with my jaw getting tighter and tighter shut internally, with my jaw getting tighter and shut, and obviously it just carried on, round the clock, 24 hours a day. My physical life snagged with a detective, replicating an interaction with a detective with my entire life snagged into it, saying sorry to me all day, every day, causing catastrophic and horrific torture and humiliation, committing crime against my power. All day, round the clock, crippling apology by a detective, apologising into my power and pulling it out all day, which is putting more pressure on my jaw, more pressure on my internal organs as they As they strip out more and more of my power, or more and more of my natural life into the institutional self, it's putting more and more pressure on my body. And at this point now, I'm in a full brain dead state, and I've said it will be one of the worst cases of institutionalisation in the country, or the worst cases of a controlled state in the country, which I know that they've been told, as of recent times, to stop doing. They got told to stop doing it in about 2005. They got told in 2005, stop stripping people's entire life out and overwhelming them. And they've ignored it, and it's 2026, that's 21 years later, and they're still doing it. So 21 years later, when they've already been told to stop doing it in the first place, they're still doing it now. So they're still in a controlled state, stripping entire lives out over a period of time like they have me. This internal mortification of self and stripping out, where it's basically internal breaking sessions, where they're communicating into your power or replicating crippling mortification of self, which is actually, it's designed for in institutes and asylums, not for when you're walking around the street and they're creating it internally. All day around the clock, crippling transgressions, threats and accusations into your power and pulling it out. But they've done it all day, every day, for that long now. It's completely overwhelmed somebody and left them in a controlled state, like a robotic brain dead state with no control over their own life. And they got told 20 years ago, the system and the justice system told them 20 years ago to stop pulling people's entire life out, stop stripping their entire power out and internalising it, because it's illegal. It's not against, they're saying it's against the rights, but it's not, it's criminal. It should be an arrestable crime, really, because they know that they're doing it, they're deliberately doing it, they're setting out with the objective. This isn't just one impulsive incident. They're doing this, they've opened the institutional self to spend 12 years, 13 years stripping their life out, creating your life around making a punch bag. So it's not just one isolated impulsive mistake that they've made. They open the institutional self with the prime objective, or in full knowledge of what they're doing, and create it over a period of time, like 13 years. So they've opened that self, or they've opened that controlled state in full knowledge of what they're doing, full responsibility. They've got full knowledge of what the implications it's having, and they're just ignoring it and carrying on doing it. And they've had multiple opportunities throughout those 13 years, 15 years to address it and stop the severity of it, or stop it from acting full stop. Within those 13 years, there've been countless chances, like there has been in Sheepcote Lane and other ones. There've been numerous opportunities whereby they can prevent any further prevent institutionalisation full stop. You cannot really escape it when somebody's sat in front of you in an interview with a big complaint, or an extensive complaint like mine, basically making it clear to stop using mortification of self, and they're ignoring that and continue doing it, committing crime against your power internally and pulling it out. Now my jaw's completely locked shut. I've got no capability of getting a fit penis erection, or I've not deemed it physically incapable. Cannot struggling to breathe, this physically restrain my breathing. Got no power in the gym, what I said last year, and it's just got progressively significantly worse. So like I said, they ignore all the damage it's doing to people, or all the negatives, or all the problems it's causing people, and carry on committing crime against the power intent. In other words, they open the institutional self with the objective of institutionalising somebody over a period of time at that individual's expense. Like mine, this institute, I've now been in I've classed it as an inhumane to be alive state now for going into the 10th year. They'll say you're a liar, you're not, but the fact is I'm not. That's the truth. I said my that institutional self that got wired shut, or got enclosed, so it got brought forward and closed in September 2016, and I've said there is no point being alive when that's on. And then all the other stuff that comes with it, like being in a controlled state, having limited ability to think for yourself, having very restricted or limited quality of life because they've stripped it out. I've said there is no doubts in my, and there's other stuff as well, like the pain, the agony, there's all other factors involved in it. But as a whole observation, or a whole summary of those 10 years, from the moment it happened in 2016, September, till now, February the 2nd, I said, as a whole, 10 years, it's been inhumane alive. I said it's been inhumane to stay alive since the moment it happened. And I'm still saying that now, and there's not been one day in between that where it's been any different. They might say, well, you've had a job in that time, or they might say there's been times where it doesn't appear to us as though it's been inhumane to stay alive because you've been, I don't know, I haven't really done anything, you've been in work. But that makes no difference whatsoever. Whilst employed, I had nothing but hell, not only with myself in a controlled state, but the controlled scenarios themselves made it clear to me at the time, the only reason that I was in work throughout that period of licence is just so that they could make me unfit to work. So the only reason that I got employed, and I got employed very fast, is solely with the objective, with the reason that they can the only reason it happened is so that they can benefit from it. They can get their own meanings to support their own narratives. So the only reason I got into work wasn't because I was getting out or getting a full prosperous life. I was in work to be incriminated as unfit to work. So all my working life within that licence with national probation was solely that. All I was subject to, or all that happened throughout that period, frequent incrimination. And it's not necessarily incrimination, it's just frequent unfit to work label. So all that happened all day, every day, whether I'm in work or at home, my life revolved around, or was centred around, or was controlled into information, scenarios, or incrimination, whereby they could gather information or evidence to support me being unfit to work. So all that what I'm saying is, all that process, whilst on licence, whilst being employed, didn't get me anything. It didn't get me any benefits whatsoever. It was just designed to make an unfit to work label, and that's what the whole process, that's what the whole experience really surrounded around, or what got centred around it. It never really changed other than that. It was just solely for that purpose. So there wasn't any benefit to me, or there wasn't any excitement for me or any enjoyment for me throughout that entire period. I was subject to incrimination, and like I said, the life centred, or the whole experience was solely created for me to be unfit to work. So all of it, I never got the full experience or natural experience because it's created to make somebody unfit to work. So throughout those 2 years, or whatever it was, the whole entire process designed my life, or created my life, as somebody unfit to work and potentially dangerous and mentally ill. That's all the process was for. So basically they made a job as officers, or the job was made whereby they could just create the entire scenario, if you want it, as just something with an end objective, or incrimination. That's all it was. There wasn't any part of it that was natural, or any part of it that really gave any benefit to me. So that's it might look as though in the system, or appear as though somebody's got art, for example, but in a matter of fact, it's only whatever they give you isn't for your benefit, which it may appear. It's just for incrimination, and that's all it was. That's all it ever was. They're not really getting you anything. They'll never get you anything. It's just solely for their purposes, or for their evidence. So whatever they get somebody might be portrayed as helping somebody, but when in matter of fact they don't do anything for anybody. It's solely for themselves. They don't do anything for anybody unless they're benefiting from it, and that's what that is. They will never ever do anything without any reasoning to it, for somebody else's sake. So whatever they do, it's not for it's not for the individual's benefit. It's always for the system's benefit, and that's all that was. That's all it ever was. That 2-year period of work wasn't for my benefit, or for my enjoyment's sake in society, or for my prospects or my future. All it is me playing a part or a role in making an unfit to work label. That's how I can summarise it. My experience with employment, or with the licence conditions, as far as employment and education is concerned, It was never at any moment for my benefit, for my future, or my natural power in society. It was just me in a controlled state, losing every day of my life to make an unfit to work label, or being incriminated as worse, potentially criminal, potentially mentally ill. So there wasn't any point in that, or any stage in time where that was for my benefit. I was just playing my role as potentially somebody that's dangerous, that's making an unfit to work label. So there was never a time within that where I got my natural life or natural power, because it was ignored in a controlled state with my life internalised, just to make the unfit to work label, which bypasses or ignores 90% of your life. Like I said, I put on the channel, I've never been in a sexual relationship. There still isn't. The last time I concluded, I said this yesterday, the last conclusion of sexual intercourse for me is 2018. It's now 2026, which means that's 8 years ago, whilst on licence. So they've not done anything since that. They've just created a synthetic scenario that's incriminating me or degraded me, that I now need justice for, to put through the system, that's not relevant to my life at all. And that's the same recurring problem with every bit of information or evidence that they gather. It's typically or usually nothing to do with a life of the individual like mine. It's just to put in the system to make a label and ignore what you're saying. So they ignore everything that you're doing or what you're entitled to, and basically kill your power to make the label, ignoring 90% of your life. Oh, I don't know, but all I can say is for 3 days, crippling physical agony, with my jaw getting tighter shut and pressure on my internal organs and the control state getting worse. All day, every day, apologise to him, my power afflicting catastrophic belittling me, detective, committing crime against my power and saying sorry to me all day, every day. That's what my life revolves around and is snagged into. Crippling, humiliation and degrading, killing my power, saying sorry into it by detective, humiliating. As I'm making this video now, my entire jaw shut with detective apologising into my power and pulling it out. So basically apologising to me and pulling out any recognition or knowledge that they've done anything wrong, leaving me more and more in a complacent state, leaving me more and more in a powerless state. And that's what Sheepcote Lane have done. They've deemed me in Sheepcote Lane as a liar, basically saying this problem's not a problem, we don't know anything about it. And now, from that, does this make sense? I've made a complaint to the police about being institutionalised. Sheepcote Lane have arrested me about this complaint. They've branded it or wrote the complaint off as false or improper, saying there isn't a crime here, there's no crime there. And now from that, internally, I'm subject to crippling apologies all day with detectives saying sorry to me and pulling out any knowledge they've committed any crime whatsoever and pulling out any power I've got to know they've done anything wrong. So therefore, by default, Sheepcote Lane have wrote off my power as somebody that's a liar, so they can pull it out for the rest of my life. So now I'm subject to a catastrophic apology all day with detective humiliating me, afflicting a crippling apology all day with all my power in society or sex power in society snagged with detectives saying sorry to me all day and pulling out any knowledge, recognition or any kind of thought process that they've done anything wrong, because Sheepcote Lane said that they've done nothing wrong. Does that make sense? So Sheepcote Lane have made it clear they've done nothing wrong, the police have done nothing wrong. So by doing that and putting it through a courtroom and saying they've done nothing wrong, now internally I'm subject to catastrophic and horrific apologies all day around the clock with a detective or the system replicating a detective interacting into my power or saying into my power sorry with the magnitude of 1,000 crimes and pulling it out all day. Because they've said, this is what I'm trying to say, they've said that genetic or that power is criminal and it's making stuff up, so pull it out. Does that make sense? They've said that genetic or that criminal power within the institutional self has been committing crime by submitting information that's false. So they then have got the duty as police or as the justice system to correct any genetic or any criminal power within the institutional self, any mental illness is what they call it, to stop them committing crime. So they've gone straight into the institutional self and started afflicting crippling transgressions and threats into my power, pulling out to say it's mental illness. And I'm now left in a powerless state, losing a significant portion of my life, more than what I was before, while they address apparent issues or criminal power that's stopping me committing crime. Does that make sense? So I've apparently committed a crime. I've apparently committed a crime according to Sheepcote Lane. They're saying you're submitting information that's false, so it's a crime. So with that, the system and officers have gone straight into my institutional self and stripped out the drives I've got to commit this crime. So I'm apparently committing crime according to them. So with that information, the system and officers within the system have got a duty to stop me doing that. They've gone straight into my institutional self or into the institutional self and started stripping out my power to stop me committing crime and stopping me submitting false information. So now I'm subject to catastrophic apologies all day, or crippling apologies all day, subject to catastrophic and crippling apologies all day, with my power snagged, or this apparently deviant power snagged, with a crippling apology round the clock, with a detective saying sorry to it, into it, pulling it out, afflicting catastrophic, and obviously the physical implications it's had are just getting worse and worse. I've just voiced them. Struggling to breathe now because they've gone into it and started stripping it out, and various other physical issues, but they don't want to account for none of that. They don't care about none of that. Apparently they can do what they want with that sole objective, ignoring any repercussions or ignoring any problems. Basically they're entitled or have got full immunity to do what they want with that sole objective. So if they're wanting to address an issue, regardless of what consequences it has or repercussions it has, they're entitled to it. They're allowed to do it and just ignore any problems that might arise from it. So they can go straight into an institutional self, start stripping the power out, saying it's criminal, but when they're stripping the power out, they're creating catastrophic and horrific consequences for the individual, and horrific and catastrophic degrading to the individual, which is costing that individual more in society or more of their life than what their crime is. So the crime that they're saying that they accuse me of is false in misusing or using false information, which as far as law's concerned is a minor crime, a minor infringement. That kind of crime really shouldn't have any long-lasting implications for the individual. It doesn't affect my life for the long term whatsoever for a crime of that nature. Any crime's a crime, but when it's a small or not serious crime, like just false information or misusing information, false or improper, it's not necessarily a life sentence. It's not within the guidelines of the law to really impact somebody's life for the long term. It's just a minor infringement. So yeah, it's a criminal act, but it's not necessarily going to cost the individual any life whatsoever as a minor infringement of the law like that. It shouldn't really, because it's not an imprisonable crime. It was just a fine. I got a £300 fine for it. So beyond that £300 fine, that's probably the weight or the magnitude or how much it's supposed to impact somebody's life, £300 fine. So the stress or any problems that I should have, really, should only ever be of the magnitude of the £300 fine. But they're using that information to go into my life and cost me potentially £500,000. Not on this occasion, but they could do that. They're wanting to go into it. No, they have. For that, the fine itself was worth £300. But for that £300, they've gone straight into my sex power, stripped all my sex power out, my ability to breathe out, which is stopping breathing, wired my jaw shut, and snagged my ability to get power in society, which has cost me already within 2 years, potentially, well, you don't even know, because I could have been in work. I could have been in work that entire time. It would have made no difference to them whether I would or I wouldn't, because they'd have still charged me for it. So there is no, put it this way, it's well over 100 times that £300 easily. So if 1,000, it's well over £30,000 already that they've cost me in my power in society. So that crime itself, to the system or to the courts, was worth one conviction, which the consequences are to me £300, which is a £300 compensation for the crimes I've committed. But to me, they've then used that information to go into my life or go into the institutional self and cost me £30,000, which is 100 times more. So the weight or magnitude isn't with the courts or isn't with my crime. It's with the individuals going into people's institutional self, or what's going on with the institutional self. They'll use mental illness or drug use or disability to potentially commit crime 1,000 times worse than what the courts are putting through. So I've apparently committed that crime, a minor infringement, a false or improper use of communications. I got a £300 fine for it. As I've said, there was no reason for that infringement to cost me any aspect of my life. There definitely wasn't any aspect of that crime that would ever cost me long-term implications for my future or prospects. But it has done that. The judge himself basically claiming that it's worth £300, so it's only worth £300. But that's not to the extent of what they're costing me. Because like I've just said, they went with that information, that one criminal infringement, the officers and system went straight into my power or straight into the institutional self, stripped out or internalised my sex power, which is worth 10 times that, stopped me from breathing, snagged my ability to get power in society and wired my jaw shut. And the process is just getting worse and worse. And I'm also now subject to crippling braking sessions around the clock. So for me, it could be worth 200, 300, 400, 500 times what that judge has said that crime's worth. So for that one infringement of the law, the officers in the system have committed against me using institutionalisation, potentially 500 times worse than what the crimes I've committed, using mental illness in the institutional self. So I've broken the law in society for apparently misusing information. They've gone straight into my institutional self to incriminate me and pretend they're addressing an issue and cost me 500 times what the crime is. That makes sense? So the power isn't with the courts. It's not within my crime I've apparently committed. It's with the use of institutionalisation and information being used in the system. Because they're costing people 500 times more than what the crime is. So it's only a rationalisation label for the system, but not necessarily having any impact on the use or with any. It's not correctly detailing the effect it's having on people or the effect or implications it has. So like I said, for me, a minor infringement doesn't have any long-lasting implications to an individual. But the individuals in the system that are not regulated and managed will make it 500 times the crime they've committed, costing them half their life, or in my case, what I've cost is 60 to 80% of my life. So just a minor infringement in the institutional self. They went straight into my institutional self over a period of months, snagged my breathing, my control over my own life, or ability to get power in society, my ability to exert physical power, my jaw completely locked shut or wired shut, and then went straight into my drives and started stripping out my sex power and sex drives and abolished that, which means I can't have children. So just for an example then, just from that one infringement of the law, improper use of communications, which is a £300 fine. So that one infringement of the law for a £300 fine, from that the system and officers have submitted that much rubbish or that much behavioural issues regarding the institutional self. I've now ended up for that £300 fine never having children. See what my problem? See my issue? I got done for improper use of communications by South Yorkshire Police, where apparently I've submitted false information. They've given me a £300 fine as a minor infringement, and now I can't have children for that. So at what point would me submitting false information stop me having children? And this is my issue. They rationalise or legitimise what they want, and the actual impact it has on somebody in society, because they're using the institutional self, it's got nothing to do with the courts or the crime. They're just rationalising, criminalising somebody to do what they want in the institutional self. In here, in reality, in society now, there is no way that a minor infringement for false or improper use at 32-year-old and a £300 fine has got anything whatsoever to do with losing somebody having children. Why would that have anything to do with me not having children? It's not a sex crime that you could even see some kind of argument with. It's not sexually related. There wasn't any aspect to it. It was just false or improper use It wasn't children related. So I've not killed 5 children or done some very Irish stuff. I've been submitting some information to South Yorkshire Police about a legitimate complaint and they don't want to take it. So they've incriminated me saying I'm submitting false information. And all the complaint was made up of was just my friends, me and my friends, saying that that's what genetics I've got. That's all it was. It had nothing to do with anything other than that, just me submitting those photos. So they're saying it's false information and doesn't lead to investigation, you're getting a £300 fine. So which bit of that, which part of that crime, which aspect of that crime then equates or means that I'm now never going to have children? At what point of that crime can they justify me not having children? Because that's what they've used it for. They went straight into my sex power, pulled every bit of my sex power out and internalised my ability to get erections. I've now classed it now, as I've done for about 5 or 6 months, probably more, probably over a year, physically incapable of having children because they snagged my power. So at what point within that crime, or within that £300 fine worth of crime, can they justify going in, deeming somebody physically incapable of having sex or having children? Can't. The severity of what they're doing for the minimal amount. So what they're doing in the institutional self isn't reflecting the crime or the information being submitted to the courts. The courts have just said that you're submitting information that's false, then that's all it is. It's just a minor £300 fine, a minor infringement. That hasn't got anything to do with the massive consequences of preventing somebody, physically deeming somebody incapable of having sex or children. But why? This is the point. It's not being truly or correctly represented, whereby that crime worth £300 is costing somebody children and the entire sex power. I had a think about it the other day, and that sex power is worth well over 100 grand. Could be a significant amount more, but just as a starter, without even thinking about it, without even actually dwelling on it or considering all the factors involved, or even like just analysing the situation or even thinking about it, I've deemed snagging somebody's sex drive, so deeming them physically incapable of having sex and stripping out all the sex power that people pay millions for, before even going into it, it'll be worth more than 100 grand, potentially 5-10 times that. Before I even think about it, it could be worth 5, 10, 20 times that, because to some people it is worth 10 times that. So I've gone to Sheepcote Lane. I've been arrested at Sheepcote Lane for improper use of a communications. The judge said, or the severity of the issue to me was worth a £300 fine. I got a £300 fine and a conviction for false information or misusing false information. So that really is the severity of it. That it doesn't go any deeper than that, or don't get any more serious than that. It's just the fact that it's a minor conviction, albeit a criminal conviction, but the fact that there wasn't any life sentences with extra factors involved. There wasn't any intermediate sentences getting reviewed by parole board. There was nothing. They were just me as a member of the public complaining to the South Yorkshire Police that they don't want to take on, and they've incriminated me as using information falsely. It got me a £300 fine. There wasn't any danger of jail or anything, especially a life sentence or anything of that nature. There wasn't anything involved with children or sex or anything of that nature. So why then, for that, months after that, what seemingly felt like overnight, have I lost my sex drives that I've immediately said's worth over 100 grand? 100 grand, probably 5, 10, 15, 20 times more than that. So with that £300 conviction as a minor infringement of the law, the officers have submitted that much shit into the system. It's now cost me my sex power in society, or physical ability to have sex, worth over 100 grand already, minimum. So for a £300 fine, that's just one aspect they've cost me straight away. That's because they create power in the institutional self. They cost people certain aspects of their life in the institutional self worth 10 to 1,000 times more than what the crime is. Like I've just said, I can't make it any more simple than that. regardless of whether I think I'm guilty or not, or what crimes I've committed, the crime's there in black and white. They accuse me of improper use of communications and submitting false information. That's the crime. That's what the law says. That is improper use of communications and false information. That's what the crime is. I don't know the guidelines for that crime. I don't know the implications of the law of that crime, but what I do know is this. That judge told me that you have got a £300 fine because it's in a category B of severity, and it wasn't that significant enough to put you on probation. So it wasn't even on probation or tag because of the severity. So realistically, it's a minor crime that had no dangers or a no life order. It had no dangers or a life sentence. It's not within the guidelines of anything. It's not. I don't believe it was even in the guidelines of prison because of the severity or ban that it was in. So the maximum that judge could have given me, taking into consideration the band of severity, you can't even go to jail for it. So you can't even go to jail. So realistically, I got the maximum punishment, which was a £300 fine for that crime. You can't, because of the, although that is the law, although that crime itself can potentially leave you in jail, the severity of it, or what the judge deemed at the time, it was only a band C. So yeah, it's improper use of communication, but it's only of a minor significance. It's only a band C. It's not a band A. It's not where I've been doing serious hacking or information devices. I've just been sending emails to police. That's it. He deemed it at the time, taking all the information into consideration, a category C offence of misuse of information or incorrect false information. He said that the usual guidelines for that are a fine. There wasn't a, he said that they could have done probation for it. The guidelines are probation for it, but he would ignore that on the basis that I've already gone out and corrected the issues by getting educated myself. So basically the maximum he could have given me is probation. He couldn't even jail me on the basis of what he deemed it at the time, the severity. So there wasn't anything about life sentences, nothing about all life orders. There wasn't anything to do with sex, there wasn't anything to do with children, there wasn't anything of that nature. It was just false information. But somehow, now, 2 years later, well, after a few months of that, seemingly overnight, up until now, 2 years later, all that's happened is the problem got 10 times worse. You went straight into my sex power, snagged my physical ability to have sex, and then started stripping out my sex power and my ability to breathe, which I've already said that is worth over 100 grand before even dwelling, before even thinking about it. So they've classified that as category C. They've classified that as category C, which is worth £300, but they've used that information to go into my institutional self, snag my sex power and cost me over 100 grand. That's what I'm saying about the institutional self. It's got nothing to do with the crime you're committing and nothing to do with what crimes I've committed or what the law is or not, because they're only using that as to justify what they're doing in the institutional self, creating power for the self. I got a £300 fine for a minor infringement. It went straight into my power and cost me 100 grand by snagging my sex power. So I'll never have children and never have sex again. So you just think, so it's got nothing whatsoever to do with anything I've done, because it had nothing to do with sex or anything to do with children. It was misuse of information or incorrect information. So why would you then be costing me 100 grand and cost me having sex with women and having children? There wasn't anything in there about that. So problem continues. All day, every day, I'm subject to crippling, degrading, a crippling apology. The detective apologising to me and committing crime against my power, costing me all day of my life. My jaw's completely wide shut. For 3 days now, I have been in physical agony with a process on my body. The detective apologising to me all day, my entire life, snagged me sorry, being humiliated, my power, saying sorry to me all day. Basically saying sorry to me whilst committing crime against me all day around the clock. And also, both nights, for 2 nights, I've been up at 3 in the morning, at 3 a.m, woken up while I'm fast asleep at 3 a.m. with a crippling transgression or crippling apology, with all my ability to speak snagged or power snagged, with a detective apologising into my power at 3 a.m. and waking me up. and it's completely wrecked my sleeping pattern. Two nights, this morning and yesterday morning. So 2 nights up at 3 a.m. when I could have slept all day. I had nothing to do those days. I had nothing to do yesterday, nothing to do the day before, just both days. Crippling apology with my power snag saying sorry at 3 a.m. both days. I had 2 hours sleep yesterday. I've managed to get about 5 or 6 hours today. 2 days running with my power snag saying sorry into my power and waking me up at 3 a.m. Basically waking me up and physically, manually awakening me and saying sorry to me while committing crime against my power while waking me up. So committing crime against my power by physically waking me up and then saying sorry for it. You understand the severity of this? This is why they create power in the institutional self. Manually waking me up with my ability to sleep internalised at 3 a.m. for 2 days running saying sorry to me while waking me up and committing crime against me, manually waking me up and then saying sorry at 3 a.m. completely wrecked my sleeping pattern. Like I said, for 3 days I've been in physical agony with my jaw shut and the institutional self pressing on my body. Problem still continues. They're basically just doing what they want. They do whatever they want. I've been in crippling physical agony now, and I mean physical agony with that process, squashing my internal organs for 3 days, and for 2 days they've woke me up at 3 in the morning, and I've had about 7 or 8 hours sleep with detectives apologising to my power while waking me up and imitating committing crime against me. And also with my physical ability to breathe for myself getting worse and worse. So with my jaw getting wired shut, my physical ability to breathe for myself, it's stopping me from breathing. I'm really having trouble with it breathing. Problem still continues. 3 days, like I said, crippling physical agony for 3 days. I mean, there's not much more I can really say about it, to be quite honest. It's just it's obviously costing me those 3 days and every day of my life in between. Absolutely shattered, absolutely exhausted. Crippling transgression with a detective, with my entire power snagged and a detective apologising into it. So all my physical life snagged into a detective saying sorry while committing crime against me and humiliating my power. So they've made a human punch bag where they can communicate sorry into 1,000 crimes with my life encapsulated. All day around the clock, hundreds if not thousands of times a day. So and now, as I said, it's the 2nd today. So realistically, it's like two years to the day. 2 years exactly to the day, to the morning. It's now 8 o'clock. They arrested me around this time, 2 years. So it's been 2 years and the critical state's got significantly worse. Crippling, degrading. They snagged all my life into all my ability to breathe now being internalised. So on and so forth, as I've just described. It's 2 years later and all that's happened is the problem's just got significantly worse. And it's cost me significantly more than the crime that they arrested me for 2 years ago. It was only improper use of communications. They snagged my sex power, my sex drives, calling me a liar, snagged my ability to breathe. My jaw's completely locked shut, getting worse and worse. My ability to speak or project words for myself's getting worse and worse. They've completely evaporated or diminished any sexual arousal or sexual tension with women, which has cost me more in my life. All my ability to exert power, whether it's in the gym or whatever else. I've not been there. I'm saying it could have been a full year since I've even been in there and done a full workout. Every time I go in there, I walk out after 5 minutes. And also now, my physical ability to breathe myself is getting worse and worse as my jaw gets tighter and tighter shut. That's because whatever information they put through the system is then used to go into the institutional self and address. So whatever information they put through in Sheepcote Lane, they've made a job or created a task for themselves to addressing my institutional self that usually or typically has serious negative impacts on the individual or catastrophic physical implications to me that I've not had anything to do with whatsoever. I've not had anything to do with any of that stuff. So they basically created power for themselves or create prowess for themselves by making what they put through or what information submitted to obviously have negative implications or catastrophic consequences. They've basically weaponised the information they submit, knowing it can have a negative impact on somebody. But I'm not liable for it, and that's what I said at the time. You can submit whatever information you want. I'm not liable, or I'm not in a situation where I have to defend it. It shouldn't be, like I said, it shouldn't be impacting somebody's life or having any effect over somebody's life. So, I mean, yeah, they just basically rationalise doing what they want, basically. They do what they want, rationalise doing what they want, and there's no consequences for their actions. They can go straight into an institutional self for improper use of information and snag the sex power or sex drives and stop them having children. So you think to yourself, well, really, can you really justify those actions with that infringement? And probably not. That's obviously the magnitude of it or weight of it significantly worse, and realistically you'd need more of an excuse to commit those acts, but it's not regulated. So for the most minor infringement, it can cost people millions or thousands, if not millions. So there needs to be a lot more regulation on the impact or negatives that it's actually having, because it's not correctly documented or known as to how serious it is for what they're doing.
Do you wish to continue?
Oh no.
So I bought a black one, and I bought...
Approval needed.
The problem is not with the crime or with the individual, it's solely with what they're rationalising their institutionalisation with, or what they're doing in the self. It's got nothing to do with any kind of pleas or anything like that. It's just solely down to the self and the implications it has. Just give me a minute, I'm just getting a drink in a minute. Cheers. And as I was saying, I just had to get a drink there. I've got an appointment this morning at 11:30, so I've just had to get an energy drink in the pound shop briefly. But so as I've explained, this will probably go on maybe nearly an hour, this footage. But the problem definitely getting significantly worse on an hourly basis, on a daily basis. All I can say about it, to summarise it briefly, for 3 days I've been in physical agony because of the self getting tighter and tighter enclosed. You can see it behind your eyes. My jaw's getting tighter and tighter shut as they pull more life out into the controlled state, the institutional self, or the controlled state, whatever you want to call it. More and more mortification of self and stripping away the sense of the self. The more that they strip out of the self, or more breaking sessions I'm subject to break down the self or corrode the self, the more that gets pulled out into the controlled state. So all they're doing is breaking down the self, or using corrosion of self, or mortification of self. 8:30.
8:30. Thank you very much.
So all they're doing is corrosion of self, or breaking down the self with mortification of self. And the more that they break down and the more that they pull out, it's just going straight into the controlled state, and it's just worsening the pressure on my jaw. Like I said, for a year now, over a year now, it's just been completely enclosed. The jaw's completely shut, whether I go to sleep at night. No, there's not been 1 minute where that jaw's not been completely shut internally or snagged, or control over my ability to speak for a full year or more. So for 12 months or more straight, without 1 second being any different, my jaw's been physically snagged shut for that full year. So and it's just getting worse on a daily basis. That's what's happened this weekend. It's now Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. and the problem just got significantly worse over the weekend. The pressure on my body, or physical suppression on my body, squashing my body, got worse and worse, stripping more and corroding more of the self out and internalising it. So like I've tried to explain before, all they'll have done is Sheepcote Lane has said this physical power in the institutional self, or this physical drive, is causing this offending. So we've got the duty or obligated to go into that institutional self as somebody that's apparent for mental health purposes or criminal purposes and address that problem. So they'll just corrode away the drive or power that's causing the problem. So they'll go straight into the institutional self, start stripping out the drive or stripping out the control over your own life, and say that they're addressing offending or addressing other issues, corroding away the self using mortification of self, committing crime against your power and pulling it out with mortification of self in internal breaking sessions all day. So like I said, they'll have just deemed that genetic or deemed that drive as criminal or mentally ill and tasked itself with a task, or the system tasked itself with a job to go into that institutional self and strip out that power. So basically it commits crime against your power with breaking sessions, bombards you with accusations, crime, threats, transgressions, basically strips away the drive and says it's addressing offending. But as I've just stated or said, they never mention or never put through the system what implications that has to the individual, what consequences that has to the person that's subject to those breaking sessions like myself, what that individual has to go through, what catastrophic effects it has to the individual, what negative impacts it has in its life. Like for example, there's a lot of sciences or a lot of research gone into mental illness and exercise, and how exercise can positively aid or help with symptoms of mental illness. And in some cases, people feel like they're cured of these problems because of exercise and exerting power. So why then, whilst I'm subject to breaking sessions, they've stripped out all my ability to exercise, all my ability to exert power, or the majority of it, which has obviously prevented me from exercising, so it's just basically having a negative impact or obviously an opposite effect of what they're trying to actually achieve. If I'm supposedly committing this criminal act and I'm trying to get into exercise, for example, I told them this at the time, and I'm trying to exercise or whatever, or exert physical power in the gym, then the only explanation or the only outcome of that is it's going to be positive. If you're a criminal and you're committing crime, but you're busy in your time with not committing crime and go to the gym, and it's having significant positive health benefits on the individual, it's obviously releasing endorphins and releasing stress, then that can only be promoted, that can only be a positive thing. That should be something that's encouraged actively and shown because of the research that's been proven by a vast array of scientists and a vast array of fields that this is only a positive thing. The exercise itself can only have a positive impact on criminality because of some of the positive benefits it gives you. So why then have they gone straight into my institutional self to apparently stop me committing crime, but then strips out all my ability to exercise, or which has dwindled into nothing? I said I could have potentially not done a full workout in the gym in a year. So they do not care less. They are basically making a mockery of all these sciences and all this information, because all they're doing is using it with the prime objective of institutionalisation. So bypassing or undercutting all these sciences and all this research that this can be benefit, this can help you, this can help you, ignoring all that and committing crime against you anyway that's having this catastrophic effect. In other words, just institutionalising somebody but ignoring any kind of defence or anything that they're doing whatsoever outside of costing them their life. That makes sense. Ignoring any negatives, ignoring any consequences or repercussions to the individual with the sole objective of hastily institutionalising somebody without accounting for the expense of the individual, without really accounting for the negatives or repercussions. So ignoring all the catastrophic effects it has or all the sciences or research that's gone into it by hundreds of thousands of professionals over years, ignoring all that information and doing what they want and going into people's power to institutionalise somebody. They're ignoring the fact that exercise can have good benefits to crime or education or promote employment. They'll ignore that and carry on the institutionalisation process anyway. That means that they're ignoring the fact that people can get out and get employed, or they can get out and do whatever they want, because they're ignoring that fact with the prime objective of institutionalising somebody. So all it is then, it's just genetic cleansing, because they're keeping people in that have probably got out 10 times over on their own accord, but they've carried on stripping away themselves. Does that make sense? So they'll ignore the fact that people can get out at any point and carry on stripping the power out, saying that they're criminal, to institutionalise somebody. But if you could have got out, you could have carried on exercising, for example. You could have addressed any issues that you had at the time and gone on to prosper, or gone on to change whatever thought process you had naturally. You ignore that, carry on stripping away the self, stop you from exercising, and you just end up institutionalised, because they're continually going into your power to incriminate you without accounting for the fact that you could have got out or could have addressed the issue. So for those 2 years, or shortly after those 2 years, when I initially joined the gym, I could have stayed in there for these 2 years, or just under 2 years. I could have stayed in that gym, and I could have been an entirely different person, not only physically, but mentally as well. So I could have addressed all these apparent issues and been in an entirely different situation that I am now. I could have been an entirely different person in society or whatever else, but they didn't want to do that, because they've got control of the situation, whereby the only objective, or the only end goal is just to institutionalise somebody. So they've carried on stripping out my power. So, or I could have had children within that time. Within those 2 years, I could have found love, struck up, obviously embraced romantic relations, obviously had a quick brush with love or whatever else, and had children. But they made that decision that they're going to carry on corroding themselves or break down your power to the extent of where I'm at now, where I've deemed myself, or where I've said on these footages I'm physically incapable of even having sex. So they've made this decision. They've made this decision themselves. Not only have they made this decision, but it's not had any input from me. They've acted in a way that is not in conjunction with what they're putting in the system. So the effect that it's having isn't correctly documented in the system as the effect that it's having. So they're saying they're addressing all these issues and they're addressing these problems, when in a matter of fact, on ground level in society, that's not the way that it's happening. They're claiming they're addressing all these problems and correcting all these problems, and they're doing all this good stuff, preventing offending and addressing illnesses and all this other stuff. When in a matter of fact, in reality, on ground level, now on street level, it's not having that impact whatsoever. It's having a totally opposite impact entirely. So really, they're living stealth, whereby the actions are actually having a complete opposite effect to what they're saying it's having. They're saying they're addressing all these problems, and that all these problems are now getting resolved over 10 years, by the way. So they're addressing all these problems over 10 years. But in a matter of fact, that's not the way that it's happening in society. And if it is, like in my case, where they're saying you've not been arrested in all this time, these 10 years, 9 years, so this must have helped you. You've stopped drugs, you don't take drugs, you don't get arrested for crime, so how has it not helped you? But they forgot to mention within that statistic, that it's obviously cost me those 10 years, that full 10 years. They forgot to mention all the implications it's had in terms of education. It stopped me getting an education, stopped me gaining long-term employment. I've now not been employed since 2019. So they forget to mention the crippling agony and breaking sessions I'm subject to every day, that's worth 10 times any crime that I could have committed. So all I can say is, for that kind of treatment, you must be the most mentally ill person that's existent, or one of the worst cases in the country. And for those kind of mental illnesses and those kind of problems, the only place that you can put them, in my opinion, is for high-risk crime, which is whole life orders, where they're indefinitely imprisoned, or they're in an asylum for mental health issues or other. Because the physical pain and agony that I'm in on a day, even then, even if you're the most criminal person in society today, or the most mentally ill person in society today, they might say it's a rights issue, but they've still not got full access to your life to commit crime against you. They can't leave you in crippling agony all day, every day like they do. They cannot just leave. They shouldn't be able to, which they do, just go into somebody's institutional self and start relativising shit all day thousands of times and costing them every day of their life, even if you're the most criminal person to have lived. But they left it in a way where it's in a barbaric state, whereby incrimination means entitlement to the power and entitlement to commit crime against them. That's what state they've left it. And then said that solicitors need to be involved to uphold the law. That's not the way it works. If anybody commits crime or leaves somebody in a physical pain or physical, especially when I'm classing as physical torture or physical agony, it doesn't matter if you've got a solicitor or not, it's an imprisonable offence. So if you've got somebody, it doesn't matter whether it's me or anybody. Some of these people are not even criminal, by the way, and they're blaming on mental illness or drug use. So there's people sat in their own homes, sometimes under the age of 16, that have got no criminal convictions. They've got some of them have not even been in trouble with the police, and they're sat in their own house with a system saying they're mentally ill, causing physical pain and agony. So you've got to, at some point then, if that's genuine mental illness, or there's genuine mental illness that's apparent here, if there's genuine mental illness in this case, they need to start regulating what kind of manual involvement these officers are having, or what information is being submitted to cause this, because they're creating power with each other or for themselves by making people mentally ill, but in some cases they've got lives, or in some cases shouldn't be mentally ill, or in some cases they've got the opportunity or power to get a life outside of what they're saying. So basically they've created an opportunity for themselves whereby what they put in the system can have detrimental or physical serious impacts. So it's 2nd of February, or this will be the intentions of it for yesterday, which is the 2nd of February. I'm going to add all the clips together from yesterday and today and days before the 2nd, and it'll total up to over 3 hours, roughly. Critical condition still continues daily, hourly, crippling transgressions, catastrophic torture, all day, round the clock, 24 hours a day. My jaw completely wide shut, and all my ability to project words or speak for myself killed or snagged as saying liar. So they've integrated or snagged my power as a saying liar or relativising liar and snagged it. And over recent years, it's just got catastrophic, where all these videos are all saying the same thing over and over again. And that's the same in society, because I've got the capability to think for myself or get power for myself, because they've internalised it. So all these videos now for 3 years, 2 years, are all saying the same thing over and over again, because they calling me a liar and snag my ability to speak to myself. Because they're saying that apparently I'm a liar that lies in court, so they're entitled to snag or physically restrain my ability to speak to myself in the institutional self, because apparently I lie to get power, which is obviously causing catastrophic effects, because it's cost me, well, I've now been homeless for 2.5 years. I've never been in long-term employment. And obviously it's inhumane to be alive. You're being physically restricted from speaking, and all these videos are saying the same thing over and over again. It's cost me the best years of my life, because they're going into the institutional self and internalising what they want. So problem still continues, critical condition, costing me the best years of my life.
You send in 41,000 emails, 350 voice messages, 744 tweets, 48 Facebook messages, and 106 letters.
I'll try and start this video again. The problem's just getting worse and worse. There's no doubts. I'm making this video for January 2026. I'm now 33 years old. I am still homeless. I've been homeless for 2.5 years, and it's going to go on to 3 years as well. There's no doubts whatsoever. And the problem with the controlled state that's caused this homelessness is just getting progressively worse and significantly worse. I'm subject to crippling braking sessions on a daily basis, costing me every day of my life in a controlled state as the process gets worse. And these videos now are just saying the same thing over and over again without any kind of elaboration or defining what's actually happening or description of what's happening, just because they've internalised my ability to speak for myself. So my ability to voice what I'm trying to say or accurately describe what's actually happening is getting difficult, abolished almost, because these videos now for years have just said the exact same stuff over and over again, and that's because they snagged my power in the justice system, saying apparently I'm a compulsive liar, and they've internalised my ability to speak to myself, saying I'm a liar. So now all these videos will just make no sense. They'll just continually say the same stuff over and over again, because I'm physically restrained or they stripped out all my ability to speak for myself. Either way, regardless, the pressure on my internal organs is getting worse and worse as the process is encapsulated shut. It's pressuring on my jaw. My jaw's catastrophic at this point. On a daily basis, it's getting worse and worse. Every day now is a significant struggle, really brain dead state. The problem of not leaving my tent's getting worse and worse as the controlled state pulls more and more of my drives out and more of my physical control. Daily basis of crippling braking sessions, stripping the power or control of my own life out. It's putting more pressure on my jaw as the process is encapsulated. You can see it behind your eyes. The process is like a dome-shaped encapsulation in the institutional self, and all they're doing all day is stripping my life out with mortification of self, or my natural power or natural control of my life, internalising it into the controlled state, and as time goes on a daily basis, hourly basis, they're stripping more of my natural life out, internalising it into the controlled state, and it's just completely overwhelmed an individual. It's institutionalised somebody, and they've set out with the objective of doing that for quite some time. This institutional self's been on me now for potentially 20 years, but it's been in a significant, critical, daily forced suicide state now for 10 years. It's going into the 10th year. Since September 2016 until now, February 2026, it's nine and a half, it's going into the 10th year of being in a critical state waiting for a forced suicide. So I've now spent 10 years of my life knowing that I'm going to get a forced suicide, with a controlled state getting progressively worse for those 10 years. So for 10 years of my life, from being in my early 20s at 23 years old, with my entire future in front of me, my prospects in front of me, my entire life in front of me at 23 years of age, with my entire future for 30, 40, 50, 60 years in front of me, I've gone from at 23-year-old having all that prosperous future in front of me to having nothing, to being degraded all day internally in crippling braking sessions, catastrophic transgressions, accusations, threats, internal braking sessions, corroding down my character and stripping out myself in an institutional self or a controlled state whereby I've got a forced suicide at the end of it. So all I've been subject to now for 10 years is crippling braking sessions at my life expense, costing me all day every day. And that's the sole truth of it. That's the truth of the matter. Today it's 28th of January. Critical condition, 5 in the morning. Internal braking sessions all night. I've just been to the McDonald's to charge my phone. And all night, crippling apology detective saying I'm sorry while humiliating my power with all my ability to get sex power in society, or in my life in society, all encapsulated or internalised into a detective, belittling, humiliating and degrading the control of my own life while overpowering me, saying sorry whilst inflicting crippling iris torture into every time my family's died and all the bereavement and grief. This is not me mentally ill. Into 50 assaults every time they've committed crime against me. Basically, every time that the system's gone into my power and committed crime against me, they're inflicting a crippling apology by detectives, consoling me that he's entitled to do what he wants and my power's dead. And they're pulling my life out all night, crippling, degrading. saying sorry to me while pulling my power to go to the gym out. So all the drive I've got to go to the gym and work out, they're apologising into my power, communicating sorry into my power and stopping me from going and pulling out all the drive to go out. I've not been in months. I haven't done a sufficient workout since last summer. Problem still continues. Crippling apology saying sorry into my power. All my power in society, or life in society, internalised with a detective. Humiliating me, saying sorry into my power all day. Crippling, degrading. This has completely destroyed my life. And as I said that, the ability I've got to say they've destroyed my life, they've been relativising it and saying sorry into it while humiliating me, committing crime against me. So all my power to have any feelings in society, or life in society, or have any kind of life in society, they're saying power. It's not power, any kind of feelings, emotions, any kind of attachment in society, feelings in society, recollection in society. All of it's been internalised with detectives saying sorry into my power over my own life. They've completely destroyed somebody's life. They've made an internal punch bag to communicate into, saying sorry into all day. There's thousands of times a day. My jaw's getting tighter and tighter shut. All day, every day. Saying, so like I just said, I've got my bag on, my rucksack on, full of stuff that I've purchased to go to the gym. I don't know why I waste my time, to be quite honest. Makes no sense wasting my time, because I buy all my stuff to go to the gym like I did last year. I get all the appropriate stuff, and they're communicating to my power saying sorry to me. Entitled to do what he wants with my entire life, snagged into a detective saying sorry to me and pull out all my drives to go. So I've just set out to go to the gym, and they're communicating sorry or committing crime against me, saying sorry and pulling out all my drives, whilst consoling me that they got away with doing what they want and I can't do anything about it. Struggling to breathe because of the pressure on my jaw and how much of a control over my own life's internalised. Controlled state getting worse and worse. It's costing me every day of my life. They've been relativising sorry and that's him then. Communicating that's him then with my entire life encapsulated. Communicating into my power with the all snagged into that's him then, into random police officers. So putting the blame on random police officers and pulling my life out as though the situation's resolved. Crippling, degrading still continues. I'm struggling to really speak for myself now. All these videos are saying the same thing over and over again. I'm completely incapable of offering any kind of information any different because they pulled it all out. Every single video is talking about critical condition, talking about power, talking about killing. This is all in relation or information that can be used against you in conjunction with their lives. It's not me voicing what's actually happening or having the opportunity to voice what's actually going on. Critical condition, all night apologising, saying sorry to me with all my power in society internalised, or my ability to get power in society internalised with detectives saying sorry to me all day and committing crime against me. Crippling apology, belittling my power, humiliating my power, degrading me, committing 1,000 crimes against me into the drive over my own life, saying sorry into it while humiliating me. Catastrophic torture continues, pressure on my jaw getting worse and worse. And to summarise tonight, I set out with my bag fully packed to go to the gym and work out, and they're communicating sorry into my power, or replicating a crippling apology, humiliating my drive, saying sorry to me whilst pulling my life out, costing me more and more in my life. This has cost me about 80% of my life because they're communicating sorry while apologising to me. My entire life snagged with a detective, taking what he wants, entitled to my power to say sorry for me and stop me getting a life. That's 80% of my life gone. And tonight is the exact reason why I've lost my entire life. Because they're snagging my life, saying sorry into my power, apologise. Apparently a detective's entitled to apologise into my power and stop me getting a life. And they're saying sorry into the control of my own life or stopping me getting on with it. So now going back to my tent, now going on to 3 years being homeless, controlled institutional state getting worse. Obviously not a chance. I'm completely incapable of having sex, incapable of working, incapable of getting an education, and the problem's just getting worse and worse. Like I said for years, all they're doing is calling me a liar and saying sorry, or imitating a detective entitled to do what he wants, saying sorry into my power and pulling it out all day. That's all it is. All day, every day, as it has been for years. My entire life snagged with a detective entitled to take what he wants, doing what he wants. I can't do anything about it. He's entitled to kill my power and I can't do anything about it. And he's saying sorry while pulling my life out and degrading me, costing me more and more in my life, just plunging me more and more into a controlled state. So, like I said, it's been inhumane to stay alive now for about 8 years and it's still going on. Sorry into my power. A detective going into my power is entitled to take what he wants. He's doing what he wants, overpowering me, saying sorry while committing crime against me. Humiliating, degrading the control over my own life, costing me every day of my life. Critical condition, they stopped me going to the gym again. Just a total waste of time like it was last year. It's cost me my entire life to communicate sorry into my power. It's destroyed somebody's life. Critical condition getting worse and worse. It's costing me my life every single day. Crippling apology by detectives with all my sex power snagged into a detective committing sex crippling humiliation to my sex power, saying sorry into it. So basically committing sex crime against me internally, like they have in society. So crippling apology, apologising into a sex power or sexual arousal with women. So all the sex power you've got with women, they're pulling it out while saying sorry into it, while belittling, degrading me, imitating detective constables, overpowering me and killing my power and they're saying sorry for it. Just getting tighter and tighter shit. It's costing me my life. It's catastrophic torture and it's a false suicide. There's no point in being. You cannot stay alive for how serious it is. It's cost me every day of my life. They snagged my power to say sorry into it all day, every day, into my sex power, inflicting catastrophic and horrific, degrading and belittling. Crippling humiliation continues. Like I said, more and more mortification of self. Crippling apology, saying sorry. My entire power snagged into a detective, killing my power and saying sorry for it, and inflicting catastrophic torture. Torture still continues. Joe's completely wired shut, completely overwhelmed, unable to get up or get anything to do. Job, you've got not a fucking chance on this planet. Not a chance. I was deemed unfit to work 6 years ago and I'm 10 times more institutionalised now. I can't even get up because of how much power they're pulling out, saying sorry into my power. All day, round the clock, crippling, degrading from the moment I opened my eyes and to the moment I went to sleep last night. My power in society snagged me a detective, killing my power, saying sorry to me, inflicting catastrophic degrading. Crippling, degrading still continues, costing me every minute or every day of my life in a controlled state, getting worse and worse. They've completely wrecked somebody's life to create a punch bag. Critical condition still continues. It's 22nd of December. Detectives, or the system replicating, with my entire life snagged, the system replicating a detective saying sorry to me. They've been relativising, if you die, we've put that institutionalisation process on you to get you into work. So they're communicating to me, so relativising, sorry, we're crippling apology into every time my family have died, every time I've had crime committed against me, or every time somebody's been entitled to my power, and relativising a detective saying sorry into it while inflicting crippling, degrading, imitating my power being dead, and he's entitled to do what he wants and he's saying sorry for it and he's wrote my power off. In other words, saying sorry to me as though the situation's resolved and my power's being killed and he's getting away with what he wants and he's saying sorry for it. Crippling apology still continues, afflicting a catastrophic, crippling, degrading apology with a detective being entitled to my power saying sorry into my ability to get power in society. So my drive to get up and get power in society is being snagged with a detective saying sorry into it. My jaw's completely wired shut. Crippling, degrading continues, crippling apology. I'm not kidding when I say this as well, this is no word of a lie. I have not left the tent for 2 days. And throughout that time, all I've been subject to is a crippling apology with detectives saying sorry to me all day, every day, into my physical ability to get power in society, and stopping me getting a life. So basically, for the last 2 days, I've not left the tent because they've stripped out every single bit of my drive of my own life to get up and get a life in society, and saying sorry with a crippling apology, imitating a detective constable being entitled to my power and consoling me that he's got away with doing what he wants, basically saying sorry to me for 1,000 crimes and imitating my power being dead. And I've just sat here now in a critical condition, they're relativising, if you die, we've put that institutionalisation process on you to get you into work. That institutionalisation process has cost me 10 years worth of work and every single day of my life for the last 10 years flat. 10 years basis has cost me every single day of my life. Crippling, degrading still continues. Critical condition, crippling apology, catastrophic apology into my ability to get power, saying sorry into the power of my own life, afflicting catastrophic and horrific torture. Like I said, I've not left the tent in 2 days, and all I've been subject to throughout that time, potentially over 1,000 times in those 2 days,
is a detective with my entire life encapsulated internally, with a detective committing crime against me saying sorry to me, inflicting crippling hardest torture, imitating his saying sorry to me for committing 1,000 crimes, and he's entitled to do what he wants, with the power of every time one of my family have died, every time I've been assaulted, every time they've cost me sexual relations with women, snagged every single bit of my power over my own life and committing crime against me, inflicting a crippling apology. So a detective saying sorry to me for every crime he's committed against me, inflicting crippling, degrading and pulling my life out as though my power's dead. Every time my family's died, every time I've been assaulted, my jaw is completely snagged shut and getting worse and worse. I've not left the tent in 2 days. Critical condition still continues, relativising a crippling apology with detectives saying I'm sorry while humiliating and degrading me. I have not left the tent in 2 days because it's getting worse and worse. They're pulling more and more of my ability to get power in society out, and it's costing me significant portions of my life. I've not been to the gym properly in months. Problem still continues, brain does stay, crippling apology and relativising I'm sorry while committing crime against me, inflicting catastrophic torture.